evening, everyone. This is take two for us tonight. So I have my friend Latasha Matthews on. I'm gonna give y'all her information and her bio. And everything's popping up. It sure is. So we are on here tonight, looking and seeing and being talking about ethics. And just excited about this conversation. So and people were looking too, like where y'all at. So thank y'all for letting us do it. Take two. Technology is always something that
Yeah.
for me and my hands I have to get used to. I am not tech savvy at all. That is not my that's not my thing. So but tonight we will go on ahead and get started. I normally don't read bios, but I love your work and I love how you got this title. I think I need to be fair tonight because everybody can't walk around with your title, and I appreciate that it's a black woman with it. I think I can say that on this cast that it's somebody black with this title. So tonight we are welcoming again. I want to call her Dr. Latasha Matthews, and I think that's just what we do in this community. Everybody a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love it. So I'm gonna speak over your life. But she's known as America's emotional wellness expert. She'll tell y'all more about that. I have followed her and her journey with that, Pessy expert, watching her do trauma expert, all of that. So yeah, she is America's emotional wellness expert. She's the CEO and clinical director of Illumination Counseling and Coaching and Why to Live Well. Latasha has over 15 years of experience as a speaker, therapist, coach. I even want to say she has more than that because I done known her at least 10. She was doing it way before then. And she also provides continuing education and training for clinicians, corporate trainings and wellness, DI, EQ, it's emotional quotient or emotional intelligence is what I'm assuming, and trauma informed resilience in the workplace. She has trained over thousands of individuals globally on the importance of setting healthy boundaries and living well. And tonight she is with us talking about ethics. And
Ethics,
so
i.e. boundaries.
that's what I was going to say. I'm going to reference a book because ethics, boundaries. So I want people to know that ethics are boundaries. I got to scream it because I think that's something that in real life, people don't know. People don't have a really good grasp about it. So I want to make sure, yeah, I am. People are coming on. I'm seeing it pop up. I want people to know your story, really how you got into it. I'm definitely pumping up your work tonight because sis wrote it down. And gave us a beautiful, I want to say it was about 11 chapters of how you can be well, and get your life around boundaries, and she includes those ethical principles. So can you tell us a little bit about how did you get into doing what you do? How did that happen?
Yeah, I first want to say, hey y'all, happy to be in the studio today. So, as it pertains to ethics and boundaries, if I'm really being transparent, my book was birthed on poor boundaries, like not having boundaries, not learning anything about boundaries within my family of origin, um, and really struggled. I'm still working, y'all, to have healthy boundaries. It's not like you you check one boundary off the list and then you're good. It normally carries over in all areas of your life. And so
Mm.
I just kept bumping my head and got tired of it. And so I started to recognize that I wasn't the only one bumping my head. And so I wanted some others to have some peace and to not take those journeys that I took. And so I wrote about it. That's the best thing to do, is to
Oh
write about your
yeah,
own
and
stuff
and you did.
because it frees you, first of all. It frees
Yeah.
you.
Yes, you wrote about it. So I got as I was reading it, it pierced me particular parts. So I said, man, so no, my journey, late nights, rolling between North Side and North Side in the greater Atlanta area, taking care of those who needed care from trauma therapists. And I was reading, I was like, Lord Jesus, and I'm still on my boundaries journey. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's
Mhm.
not. But what I will say is your work did not bring any shame. It was really freeing to know. And so the other thing I want to know, how did you get into being a therapist? Because again, that's a huge title. Like I love your title. Like, and it's not Black America. She is America's wellness expert, and she emotional wellness expert, and she proves that in her work. Because if anybody's a therapist watching, be aware that it takes some tenacity to get into PESI on an ongoing space, and people can go buy your stuff. So, can you tell us how how
Yeah,
you how
yeah.
you got?
So I want to just circle back because before I was a therapist, I was in HR for 13 or 14 years, and that's where therapy was really birthed for me because I had an opportunity to work with employees and see how employees were not being treated properly. And so it was my job to really slap employees on the hand for poor performance. But me
Ooh.
being nosy, I wanted to know why. Why are you having these problems? What's going on at home? What's going on with your mama? What's going on with your cousin? Let me give you some tips, right? I knew nothing about therapy at that point, but I was counseling these employees and helping them perform better on their job. Um, but what I found is that back when I was in HR, they weren't really ready for emotional wellness. They weren't ready for it was EOC back then. They Black people into spaces for numbers. And so that didn't really sit with my soul real well. And so I had to transition out of corporate and work in a space that allowed me to really help people. So that's how I got into counseling, and really being honest.
Wow. Like, so, I never asked you that part of your background. Like, so you started out incorporating HR, providing skill set. I am going to throw a plug though, because then you went
Mhm.
and got this new skill set, and we about to talk about it, the ethical portions of it. Because where did you, outside of being in HR, counseling people? Because you born into it, in my opinion. Like, if you're a therapist, somebody knew you was gonna be a therapist. Like, it was just gonna be there. You had the capacity to hold space. Like, where did you start your therapist journey?
Yeah, definitely. I would say it started in the church. Most people don't know that either. I started, well, I've done a lot of work in the church, but what interests me in counseling was my work in one particular church, and I won't name the church, but I will name the program. So there was a program called Neurothetic Counseling. It's by Jay Adams, old white guy, which is fine. But this program, and again, you're young and you just want to help people. You don't know what you're getting into. You just signing up for stuff. Neurothetic counseling is restoring people back to Christ. So this particular program really denounced anything outside of restoring people back to Christ. Right. I didn't know what I signed up for, y'all. So I am there. I'm sitting with my first parishioner, and I'm got my books and my Bible and my notes, and I'm trying to restore this church member back to Christ. And I remember distinctly hearing the church member say, I am Christ. And I said, well, what do I do with that? Okay, that ain't in my book. He's telling me he's Christ. And he's telling me that there's 3 or 4 Christs in the room.
Hmm.
And so from that point, I recognized that I needed something else besides this Jay Adams restoring people back to Christ. There were some other pieces that no one told me about. No one gave me any education about what to do if Christ is in the session with you and the church member. So let's start there.
Whoo! It's so, again, this is why she is here, because we're gonna talk about these ethics, boundaries, and knowledge tonight. So let's start right there. So I'm so glad that you recognized that and saw that. So dealing with dealing with American churches, and I'll just put it out there tonight, because some churches I don't know about cross seas. I know the westernized model, um, but just being in that situation, how have you seen that since you left? Have you seen that change? That there's an ethical standard to providing emotional wellness care for parishioners. Like, have you seen that change? Are we still providing stuff that we shouldn't? Or is it something that churches need to do? Because I mean, this is 2023, and I just heard a pastor preach it. He said that if you really want cure for your mental illness, the Holy Spirit will cure you. That this is 2023, February 2023. I heard the pastor say that. He meant it. Not offering any therapeutic support, not anything to the person. He said that out loud. I said, "Oh wow, no." So, which is the situation you ended up with? Because I don't know what their mental health issue was, but you had Jesus in your office. So have you seen it, or is there any space where you can provide anything around boundary for the church when it comes down to the ethical practice of providing emotional wellness services?
Well, I definitely think that we have made some advances. Um, and I've seen it in lots of churches. There are some advances to stick a foot into emotional wellness and mental health. However, I do think until mental health is a line item on the budget and P&L statement,
Mm.
it's not going to be taken. It's not going to be taken seriously. So when it's equal to the women's ministry and the outreach ministry and the kids ministry and the young adult ministry, then we will see the shift in how well our members are and how we build the kingdom of Christ.
Okay, well, Tasha want to come in hot and heavy. So, you came
I
in hot
mean,
and heavy. So, who? Well, I as I said, I'm just thinking about it too. Like what you just said, something huge. Like once it becomes a line item, and you have worked with different corporations, different agencies. You do diversity, equity, and inclusion. Make sure I get all my letters together.
mhm.
And I don't know if any church has asked you to come in and do this and talk about boundary setting and ethics.
I have talked at churches about setting and ethics, but it's typically about how to set boundaries outside of the church. But when we talk about what's needed in the church, when you're developing mental health and emotional wellness, you can't have the receptionist doing the intake
Ooh.
for your clients. You cannot have the paperwork flooding through the reception area and think that that is ethically sound or morally sound. You can't blend the counselors. You have to have some structure within your counseling ministry so that they know, even if they're not licensed, that there has to be a standard of confidentiality. They have to have some separation, and that dual relationships do exist in the church, and we have to really talk about it. That was the first thing I noticed, that as I was finishing up my master's, we talk about this dual relationship. So I began to write about dual relationships in the church, multiple relationships, and how you deal with those relationships. And so until we really use the language that we're using in our secular counseling and bring that into the church and really educate those that are serving, we go struggle with hurting and harming people, because those people come back into my practice and say how they were traumatized in the church because their whole situation was out in front of everybody. Until we recognize that it's not separate and it should be together, and that we need to have some structure in place, people are going to get harmed from plain counseling in the church, because we play sometimes.
Who? Okay, so maybe I wasn't ready for this conversation because I'm just sitting here soaking this in. Especially, you know, the secretary who's bubbly bouncy. I've been a member of the church where the secretary was bubbly bouncy, but they did know your business. Like they absolutely knew what you
Mhm.
were coming in for. they were telling you about what you were going to talk about, and you trying to figure out how did you know how did you know the details of my business? Be like, Pastor gonna love you through it. I'm like, I literally just called to schedule an appointment with you. I'm trying to figure out how you know my X, Y, and Z. And so, like the harm that can come. So even in your intro in your book, because again, this was personal, but I loved when I read it how it really can move through how we manage this, and you define boundaries. And when you defined it, I'm just going to read it out. It's the unofficial rules of what should be done. The unofficial rules of what should be done, and limits the define that define acceptable behavior. So in therapy, we would just end up saying that that's good practice or ethics. That's how we got here tonight. But for church, I come from an autonomous space. I'm Baptist all day. And so it's really hard from where I come from to have some level of ethical code in that space. I know connectional spaces have an ethic that they follow, but it ain't as deep as this definition because we still have a lot of this harm happening. So what would you offer even about churches updating or including or going back to adding a code of ethics or setting these rules that create limits on what should be done?
Yeah, definitely. If there is a counseling section or a counseling department, we first have to start by educating the leaders on their limits, not because they can't serve and practice, because everyone has an intention to help. But just knowing your scope of practice and knowing what's outside of your scope, perhaps having a good resource list, and sticking to the main thing. If the main thing is pastoring and hearing from God, um, it's important for the pastor to be able to do that and not feel like he has to be all things to all people, or she has to be all things to all people. So having a resource list, having trusted individuals that have the skill set that can guide you, doing some consultation, talking to someone, getting a consultant to come in and talk about the structure of the organization. If you are desiring to start a counseling practice, making sure that you have good malpractice insurance and making sure that your insurance covers the the people that you are entrusting to work with individuals. And so it has to run like a business. Churches are business. And so that counseling department really needs to run like a business. You need to have all your ducks in a row, regardless on if you're using lay counselors or if you're using licensed individuals.
So I'm gonna dig deeper right here because you said something. I know the church I grew up in, it would probably be new for them. But actually having insurance outside of the building insurance and possible health insurance for some pastors. I know some pastors don't even have health insurance from their church, but the offering of liability insurance for the person that may be practicing in the seat of emotional wellness care if they actually have an emotional wellness care unit at their church. Like what that insurance piece, because we're talking real tonight. Like does the Black faith community understand the ethical parts about emotional wellness, even down that liability insurance is important, because even down to pastors saying things like the Holy Spirit cured you, and we work as private therapists, right, in our practices, and you say the wrong thing, they gonna come back and say you said I was cured. I'm gonna get you. So can you explain that? Can you go deeper into that so that hopefully those who watch the replay and are on here tonight can hear the importance of I said CYA for your church?
Yes, yes, definitely. I mean, at this day and age, we hoping that all churches have insurance.
Mm.
And there has to be some levels of insurance because you're working with kids, and so there are some, hopefully some pieces in place that protect churches from, you know, kids ministries and things of that nature. So I would hope that that is already in place. But then there's another layer that churches probably have to look into regarding malpractice insurance, specifically if they are structuring. Some churches will have the church and then they will have counseling centers. And so if you have a subsidiary of the church, you're going to have malpractice insurance. You're going to know the limits based on the number of people within the church. It's just important to just do your due diligence to make sure that all bases are covered. Even if you have a lay counseling ministry, if something happens, they can come after the church. So just making sure that you're covered, you're thinking about that, you're making sure that there's background checks. Now, I know I've done a lot of work at various churches, and I don't remember them doing a background check. It was just you have a desire to serve. And so that was years ago. And so yeah, I wasn't licensed. And
Yeah.
so I don't know.
And I mean,
I'm thinking that.
and I've been in spaces. I can't say, several spaces I've been in. They did have the background check, which is still for the black church, for black faith community. That's a newer thing. Like and so the dangers that have come in that now push us to have these ethical conversations. And for anybody who's listening or may listen, in the last 50 years, and I'm stretching it. Maybe you could probably come on and shorten it, but I'm stretching it. But people have been able to call out aggressions and abuse, but also the shortcoming of that is I call out the aggression and the abuse, but it's the person who's sitting in the counselor seat, because 90% of the time it's going to be a pastor who has caused the aggression and the abusive stance. So that need for insurance, because the Z generation don't mind filing a lawsuit. I've realized that, and they don't mind holding you accountable. That's what has been said to me. I don't mind holding you accountable, but calling that thing out. So in ethical practice, what can we do around having those pieces in place that are needed externally, but ethically? How can we start doing some internal work with staff around, if I call and set an appointment with the person who's on staff to do counseling, keeping it confidential? What does that, if that's something that you can recommend, or how that looks? And who should actually sit in that seat of intake? I know we mentioned it, but who should be sitting in that intake seat? Because it probably should not be the church secretary. I'm with you on that. Like, because mother just want to love everybody. That's but she should know my business.
Yeah. I mean, we're giggling, but it happens. Definitely, you have to have a church business plan for ministry, for the counseling ministry, and really have designated individuals in place that, licensed or unlicensed, that you've put through some type of training, some type of structure, so we can have a flow chart on what's going to happen from step 1, 2, and 3. And then they need to sign documents. They need to sign an oath, just like we signed when we got our license. This is what you're agreeing to. And then there needs to be someone who's in charge of this mission. It shouldn't be loosey goosey. We should have a person who's managing the process, because, again, we're talking about um, members who probably won't go to counseling outside of the church. I know that there are a lot of members that do everything within the church. And if they are harmed from that experience, then it makes the licensed counselor have to really work hard, because
Yes.
they're now coming to us, and it's a lot. We are re-educating them on why the church is still healthy, why that experience. I mean, it's a lot.
Whew, man. Oh, so that was something you put chapter 1, skirting. and I know that we skirt around issues, we avoid them. It's almost as if the church has this avoidant attachment space. Like we want people to come in, but we don't want people to be in. And so the Black faith community has struggled around what we understand to be emotional wellness care or mental health. And in most cases, I'm still hearing in 2023 the mental illness. Like I don't have a mental illness, so I don't even know why this is relevant. But how can we move beyond skirting and around the issue of emotional wellness? Because we put a lot. Catch the replay if you're just coming on, because all of the foundational stuff, Latasha put that out there like this is what you need. But the skirting and the avoidance, because in truth be told, talking about emotional wellness in Black faith space, that's scary because we really are asking people to be vulnerable. Like we are saying, tell your business, but we are inviting you tonight, tell your business ethically and with boundaries in secure spaces. So how can we introduce that to Black faith community so where it won't continue to be a fight between therapeutic practice and therapeutic space, and literally knowing that for those of you who identify as Christian, Isaiah tells us about this wonderful counselor, Jesus. So knowing that we can have Jesus and we can have good therapy, what does it look like with the ethical concerns or the boundaries around that?
Yes, so definitely, if more pastors are really opening up their messages and talking about emotional wellness and mental health, and really looking at the stories in the Bible, everything we need is in the Bible, and really coining the message around emotional wellness, and really, I think we talked about this when I sent you that YouTube. It's not a separation. We've separated it out for so long. It's God therapy. God therapy. It's not God and therapy. We can come up with a word. God therapy. it's
Yeah, I
it's
totally agree.
we don't separate out our medical professions. We can get in the pulpit and talk about, health just like that. We can talk about finances just like that because we're always talking about tithing and offering. So we have to talk about emotional wellness as it's layered just like everything else. So it's not separated out. So we as members don't feel like, ooh, this is an add-on. Like we going to a drive-through and we getting the combo and the apple pie. It's inclusive.
Ooh, we that ooh. So I want to stay right there with the scripture. So one of my favorite scriptures, people who watch this, they know I throw it out. When we talk about the riches of glory being tied to our inner man. And the YouTube you sent me was amazing. I probably should have played that clip tonight. I'm gonna learn how to use this thing right. So that might have needed to be so but that but making it not a add-on or the apple pie that you need to leave back. Like I don't need to add that. I got, or not making it an additional course of something. But like what in scripture, where have you seen that and that you offer to the spiritual spaces where you go and teach them, hey, you need emotional wellness care with these ethics? Like what scriptures are you using? Because that was
Well,
huge.
yeah, definitely. I use Galatians 5:22 and 23 when we talk about, all of the promises that the Bible lays out for us.
Yeah.
They're conditional. You have to do some things to yield these promises. And so we give up our ability to have healthy boundaries to get peace and love and joy when we step out of the comfort and the protection of God. And
Tasha, you don't hurt
so,
people's feelings. Now you said because what I know about God is that God to do all things for me, and you just told me that it's some conditions on and what I need to do, and that's not what I know. Well, I'm just speaking for the people I know who might be watching. Like, what's she talking about?
well, I can only speak for me. when I stepped outside of, and we can go back to, in the beginning of the Bible when God kind of said, you can have all of this. I'm giving you all of this. But this one thing I need you to chill on. I need you to don't touch that one thing.
And what we
So
do?
mm,
Touched it.
we always want the one thing, but the boundaries were open. They were free. But when we step outside of this this safety net, it caused us not to have the some of the things that we're talking about. Some of the promises were delayed because we stepped outside of what was already there for us. So boundaries are not this rigid thing that keeps you from doing stuff. We had it all. We forfeited it. We forfeited it for something that wasn't even worth it. And so once you kind of don't you decide not to set good boundaries, then you have to come back and set rigid boundaries because you've been harmed and you don't trust anymore. Your eyes are open. And so it's important for us to recognize that the boundaries are for our protection and our love and not for hindrance and ill will.
Well, I want to shout. I want to shout where I'm at right now because that, yeah, the way she just broke down Genesis, yeah, I'm only gonna read that. Like, it was just one thing was that was it, and we had to have it. And now here are these rigid boundaries. Can't go back into the garden. You gotta put some clothes on. You got all these rules, and it's
And the way it shows up in our life, because taking it from Bible to application, I don't trust people.
ooh,
I can't have healthy relationships.
ooh.
I have a unhealthy relationship with food and money, because now I'm trying to hold on to everything because I'm scared. And so in the church, no one really knows what to do with that because they don't understand that that's a trauma response. And so then there's these other things that are happening. We're trying to like lay hands on somebody and pull stuff out of folks that don't even have anything to do with what we're trying to call it, because we haven't really identified what it is.
We only 30 minutes in here. You done woke me out. You done woke me out. Oh, so the oh God, I gotta make it through this. And I'm the one who asked you to do this. Like you tear me up. Like but I almost had a tear because I was like, shit, it came from my neck. Oh, but that because we do avoid it. Like we don't know what to do with it.
Mhm.
You said something so powerful. We don't know what to do with the trauma responses that show up in our congregation. So we try to lay hands on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've
God,
seen it.
and we
I've,
and that is some of the scariest not good practice work I've seen ever. I had an experience at church, and to this day I don't like working the altar after this experience. And because at the altar I'm laying things down. I'm inviting you to do that. I'm leery of that invite now. And so we're around the altar and the person is saying their need, having a trauma response and reporting the need along with the reason for the need. Everything is in the building. This is external. All the people in the building that caused the issue. And we couldn't report it. Like it was, and I stepped away as soon as I heard the sounds and crackles. As a therapist, like, oh, this is gonna sound like something I don't need to hear. I said, I can't work the altar. And I had to tell my pastor at the time, I can't work the altar anymore. Because we don't have anything that says what we need to follow. And at the time, the church, this was almost 2 decades ago. Again, they didn't know how to write that down either because there was the conflict. Well, we keep people's business on the altar. Yeah, but we finna send somebody back home with their abuser, and their response to the altar call was a trauma response. You said you could help me, and you said Jesus will fix it, and I'm coming up here telling you how Jesus can fix it today. Don't make me go home. And so, like, This is stuff I want to put it out here too. Pastors, if y'all watching this, y'all better call Latasha Matthews. Y'all better go look up. I'll put all her information in because she need to come out to your church and set up some things, and y'all need to put money in her hand because you need to give her the honor that is due. Because she give y'all some nuggets tonight. But how do we do that for our people, especially our professionals? I know the state of Georgia changed. They recently changed their rules because 20 years ago pastors were not mandated. We're not mandated reporters. And so that pastor wasn't wrong when he said that to us. He said, I don't have to say nothing. I don't have to do anything. But recently I think they've updated the code. And so, but what do we need to do? Because I'm pretty sure pastors may not be learning that in their congregations too about mandated reporting and that altar work. Because it's important. I'm not knocking altar work. I believe in the laying on the hands, speaking in tongues. I believe in all of that. Everybody who know me know I know. But we still have to protect the agency of the church. So what does that look like? Just briefly, like some nuggets around what that looks like for our congregations and Black faith community, period.
Definitely having the conversations and being open enough to say, I don't have the answers, and seeking out those that will give you the answers. I know that you have a space, tons of individuals have a space, but just making sure that if you don't have a mental health professional that you trust in your congregation, then bring one in to just talk to them, just find out, get some guidance on how to start that journey. One, I ain't gonna say easy way to start the journey is just have a dedicated line for calls of crisis. Have a dedicated line for crisis calls. Have one person who is licensed or who understands mental health. Have that person in place to be able to assess if these are calls that need to go outside of the church or calls that if you have, some groups or some things in place, you can start with a call line and then have someone man the call line. If you don't have the resources, because a lot of times what we're talking about is resources and manpower. Just make sure that you can structure it, that we're going to start here. That will give your members a safe place to call, because they may not call, the access line outside. They may feel more comfortable starting in the church, and then have a resource manual that you can at least give your members that will have counselors information in it. So at least they can go to those counselors based on someone who screened those counselors, because all counselors are not created equal.
They're not. They're not all equal. Yeah, they're not all equal.
You can be sending them into the fire. So that's what it is. But
Yes.
just be open to to seek out some guidance from those who want to support.
Wow.
I've wanted to support churches for so long, and they just either don't believe it's valuable, don't want to invest the resources, or think it's an outside job, and then it's not. It's going to make the pastors, you're working harder than you have to. If you got half of your congregation traumatized, the message is falling on deaf ear. It's just falling. They go scream, shout, holler, and go home and be struggling. And then they're going to blame it on you. You're getting blamed. You and God.
My God. Let that rest on y'all now. Look, because this becomes a podcast, so it sounds like dead air on purpose a little bit, so you can hear it. Especially the weight of pastors. And so even when you said that, I thought, ethically, we want to, that resource list was a beautiful offer. And pastors, they believe it costs money, and I'm like, it really costs your copier. Like, how much is it for ink? You can go in and vet. I've witnessed the church do it. They vet the therapist. They have a therapist. I love her. She's watched me in my therapy journey. And I'm from Cartersville, Georgia. This happens in Cartersville. It's not real Metro Atlanta, even though they say we are, but it's Cartersville. And this church that might have on record probably 300 or 400 members, that there is a person who she's a therapist herself, and she puts a resource list together and she vets them. The pastor even says, can you do it? Because I don't know. And she asked people in the area who live there, would you mind going on our resource list? We know X, Y, and Z, and you will line up with, what our congregation is learning, and you won't provide, a re-traumatization to our members. And again, how you said, pastors, that puts power in your hand. That's not unethical for a pastor to vet people to come in and talk to their sheep. Like, she just gave y'all a whole, that's $1,000 nugget that you're gonna get from her Pepsi talk, like that she just gave you. As you as a pastor, you do have a right to vet who goes on that list, how you print it out, and where you provide the information, so that you don't have to see how y'all do it.
Yeah, and there are so many pastors in the digital world. It doesn't have to be anything you print out, because digitally, it's click, click, click. A lot of pastors have apps. I mean, it's
just
a
add it to
whole
your app. Add a resource to your app. Yes, add a resource to your app or your webpage. And you can. So, like these things that really was, I mean, we giggling, but that really was something. Boom, click. Like, I did it and I provided it, and it can take the weight off, and you can move now into, again, a healthier best practice, and you don't have to keep trying to fix stuff for your members. Your altar call won't change, but people will understand the boundary around the altar call. Like, if you say X, Y, and Z at this altar call, we're gonna refer you here. We're gonna pray for you, cover your soul, and we're gonna refer you over here to this, so that you can get the adequate help that you need. Because I'm not knocking. I believe the Holy Spirit gonna heal what the Holy Spirit gonna heal. I believe God is a healer. God created us and knows our minds. God puts us in the space of renewal. God does this, but also God puts humans in place to assist. And we need to learn how to access that, for those who are in leadership in our church spaces and our spiritual spaces. So you don't have to be the end all be all for all your people anymore. You hope that people are being freed from that when they hear this conversation. And moving into that,
I have one more. I want to have one more comment I want to make. And then for the churches that have decided to embark on their counseling ministry journey, if you have 2,000 members, you cannot have 6 counselors. Woo! If you're going to do the thing, you just have to do the thing. I mean, that is going to burn your counseling staff out. These are volunteers in most cases. So you have to either invest in some resources, you have to pay the people, or you're going to have to get a bigger staff. It's still not effective, because I mean, they're going to be tapped out. So if you're going to do it, offer the resources, because you cannot manage a large number of people and not have the staff to do it.
My God, on today. Now, first of all, let me tell y'all, I told her, so I'm going to pull some nuggets from your book, but we're going to flow with the conversation. My next quote from her book, she was talking about the legitimacy and the authenticity of your boundary. She just threw something at you. Again, it's in $1,000 presentation. You pay for it. You getting it tonight. We're going to bless the woman of God tonight too, because listen, do not have, if the teaching ratio at a school is 30-1, that's a public school, APS school. We'll throw it out there. That's a very large number, by the way. Do not believe your 2,000 member church gonna function on 4 therapists. Because you're gonna watch the
you know they part-time because they working and it's volunteer.
They really got their real job. So that too. And I got a dear friend that's doing this now. Don't think your $2,000 person congregation is gonna focus on 2 therapists. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because they're volunteering their time, and if you're paying them, they have a schedule that they do have to maintain. Because here we are, with the authenticity and the legitimacy of what they can commit to. They cannot be the 24-hour line. It's also the 8 to 5 therapist that also is a member of your church. Yeah, they can't, because eventually somebody gonna fade. And I can on this end, you gonna watch a therapist fade. Like, I'm gonna watch it online because I'm burnt. Because we gotta have healthy boundaries around that too. That was so good how you said that. Like the authenticity and the legitimacy of your programming, your emotional wellness programming at your church. Please don't burn your people out if you are setting it up. And for some people refer out. I know at some larger churches, they do not have a unit. They refer out. So how would you say vet out the referral? Because I know some people don't know ethically how to vet out. I want to throw this out, and I do, because this is not my area. That's why you here tonight. I just believe that they should be grounded in what they know. And then in the case of Black wellness and Black faith community, I wonder, do you believe it? Like, should they look like us? Because it's really hard for me, I know, to go talk to someone who hasn't had some similar life experience or doesn't know Christ. Like, I mean, my personal therapist is a believer, and we have our conversations and we have our sessions, but I wouldn't be able to go to somebody who didn't have my same faith tradition. So in vetting out and connecting, how does that look?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I will tell you that my first two therapists were Caucasian Christian women.
Mhm.
And again, I think over the years I've evolved. I've had lots of different counselors. I
Mhm.
definitely think so. There's two schools of thought. You want them to be a believer, um, and you want them to be licensed. And so I do think that as you are vetting, um, I think you have to look for one based on what your population needs. So if you have a lot of um, church members that have been sexually abused, domestic violence, you have a lot of couples, you have a
Mhm.
population of, you know, um, teen moms or any of the demographics. So look at your numbers to see who you have in your congregation, and then the calls that are coming in. That's going to tell you who you're looking for, your ideal clinicians, and then just have a variety of men and women, so that they can serve the whole house. Some different specialty areas. When I've done a lot of talks, I've made sure that the members understand the difference between a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a marriage and family therapist, because a lot of times people don't know the differences in who they're talking to. They don't know what a social worker is. They think everybody is the same. So they are trying to get therapy from a psychiatrist and get mad because the psychiatrist is only going to talk 10 or 15 minutes. So again, having someone educate the church on just the basics of who should I talk to for what, and then we can get to what person I should talk to.
Woo. So, girl, you were like, because the next thing, there was one other thing, and I'm looking at the time and I'm throwing this in. If you open up a can of worms, you fuss at me. But I know in this conversation, it might hit home. It might even be hard. I know some pastors are just looking for this conversation. Like, we mean ethics. Like, yeah, we ethical. Like, we not harming people. We bringing people to Christ. We're bringing people to God. We're loving people. Um, but you talked about, this was your chapter about money. And what I have heard in the last 3 years is, if we do bring in these experts, if we do bring in people who might go against what we preached on Sunday, but they still in the Bible, I've witnessed that, then that's gonna mess up how we flowing over here. And that's gonna mess that up. So, I speaking a little bit to, this is not insulting, but the the entitlement of the Black faith community to work through that emotion to maintain itself. Like if we have a high emotion, we have a high offering. If I preach really good, do you tell me you feel better? So I don't offer you services that I know that you need. Um, like so. How can we work through that so that because it almost sounds like there's a fear of losing people when we give them access to care and we show up for them.
Hmm. Ooh, we have to do a whole another show. Um, so so we all have to work on our money trauma and our money story.
Yeah.
Um, my prayer for the pastor who is struggling with um, controlling the
Mm.
narrative to increase anything is that God heals you and that you do your own work around trauma and money, because
Ooh.
that's a trauma response to scarcity. And we in the book, the God that I serve says that I'm going to have an abundant life. And if you're leading me and you don't quite believe that, then you just have to do your own work.
We gonna have to come. I promise we'll come back. We'll come back with this because I won't lay that on you. That's so cold of me to even throw that out here tonight. I was going through your book. That was me. We will come back with some other experts around. Cause I got my legal person on here tonight. I don't even know if she just heard what you said because she just popped on. But I hope y'all heard. We have trauma around money and
Mm-hmm.
pastors. That it is the last 3 years. I can't remember the statistic in the last 3 years of how many pastors quit because they could not maintain the money, and the emotional high was no longer working. It was like this ain't this ain't it. Like, and so we didn't have anything. My other head of ministry, we didn't have anything to offer people. Like because I've been offering you feel goods for 15 years and y'all ain't had a problem with it. And now I don't know what to do with this. Like, so let me hoop you. You like, nah, I need to sit on somebody's couch. Why would you do that? So yeah, we need to come back because that is I don't want to say pastors are entitled. I think some of that is because of the care and compassion I have for that office, for pastoring people and being a leader. But there is something about being entitled to working emotion, knowing what their offering is gonna look like. Like I done been in the back room of a church too, and we'll be like, "Just make sure the people can hear." That's what you will say, because
But
we
don't you think?
$5
I
short
mean,
on budget.
yeah. But and again, you've seen both sides. I've been in the back and seen some things as well. But because we are therapists, we also know that comes from a place of trauma. It comes from some we have some narcissistic organizations, we have some traumatic organizations, and we have people, because it's not people make up the organizations. And so if a pastor has not done their own work, just like I got to do my work, you got to do your own work. You don't stand up there and I mean, you still have work to do while you standing before the people.
Ooh, so we here. um, we here tonight. So we hit it. God ethics. I am not. This was not toward any congregation, anybody personal. This is an
Mhm.
offering to the Black faith community because we're coming into for what I do for a living. May 11th is going to be a post-pandemic culture, that according to Joe Biden, we ended all protocols, right? So the therapists, we still got the weight of this though, and wanted to offer, the ethical platform that you could build. This is nuggets. This is not a full day of DEI. This is not a full day of ethics for your church. And I would never dishonor my sister by telling her, "Hey, let's come on and you do all your best work." No, I'm glad she spoke how she spoke because she got the material to prove it. She is America's emotional wellness expert on purpose. And we see, how she got that, like from her own experiences, and she wanted to offer. So I I don't see anybody. They're not putting some questions in. They might have some questions. If y'all do, put them up. But I really do, Latasha, this is a hard topic for the church. Like it is, because it does feel like you picking on them. Like, I mean, and even when I wrote it out, I said, okay. And I spoke to one of my mentors, and he said, well, it's gonna feel like somebody getting picked on. I mean, but that's it, because Black faith community has is less than 100 years into a space of even being concerned about ethics, because we were concerned about survival, that trauma. Like 1968 is when we finally could sit down and say, oh, what could be an ethical practice, because we were just trying to survive. So I wonder what would be something you would leave there, because we've thrown trauma in, but what are some things around ethical practice that our faith community could look for in regards to how ethics are connecting to the lack of ethical practice, or even the overuse of ethical practice, maybe relating to trauma in the Black faith community?
Okay, I'm gonna need you to repeat that one more time for me. I was
Like,
listening.
it's the last question. How could, what are some things you could point out that look like trauma, and our ethical response? Maybe that's a better question. The trauma that we can see in the Black faith community's ethical response to it, or lack thereof.
You talked a little bit about it. If someone has a need, um, offer them prayer, but offer them resources.
Yeah.
So prayer, and I need you to go talk to somebody. What I hear is outside of my scope. Here is a resource for you. We love you. We believe that God can heal you. However, I believe that there's some stuff underneath that will be helpful.
Ah. Oh God, that's good. So we do have a question. I'm gonna put it up. Okay. Most pastors and preachers quote, "But he was wounded for our transgressions; with his stripes we are healed." How do we heal without implying that violence is needed, or that violence is even biblical? That's a good question.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it, and I think that's what was leaning into some of my question too, because again, I want Black faith community to just take that breath in. We are less than 100 years out
Yeah, yeah,
from being able to even think about not having, and we're really not even that. We probably less than a week out in real life, but having violence happening in our church, like scared that somebody gonna bomb it, blow it up, shoot it up, So how
yeah. I agree
do
with
we?
Juana. Yeah, that's a great question, Natasha. I definitely think that we need to break down the context of
Ooh,
the
ooh,
word. I have this resource because I've gone through a lot of biblical training courses that talks about context. Context really matter. What was going on in the Bible? Today we got 3 points and a snap, and so a lot of times we're not able to get into the context. What was happening for the writer at the time to say that quote? And so we pull out the quotes, but we don't talk about the history. We don't talk about it's in Greek. We don't talk about what's happening, the times. We just pull it out. So I do think, Natasha, there has to be some unlearning and relearning. Um, I know that I have heard lots of quotes that have had me scared over the years. And then I found out, like, okay, somebody just pulled that out. There are some pieces that came before that and after that. I've been told you need to read what was going on before, after, go back to the chapter before, the book before. It is not a pull out situation.
I know my much context matters. So thank you, Natasha. That, and it does, like, for, again, for my leaders listening tonight, for lay people listening tonight, being mindful of the scripture you offer It's very important to someone's healing. Very important to
Mhm.
someone's healing. Context matters. Very much so. I've even had to reorganize my thoughts around ham. Like you just said, like, they treat us bad because we black. Well, that's not the reason. That no, that when we shouldn't be treated like ham. That's a legal charge. If you go read what he did to his daddy, what that really means. He assaulted his father. So, like, that's when he walked in on him naked. That's a whole, you gotta study it. So I'm like, oh no, this is wrong. But instead of, we lift up things in the text that really can bring damage to someone. So thank you for saying that, because that really does matter. Thank you for asking that question, because if we don't address the violence that's there, it's like almost we're missing what our people are asking for and what to refer them to. How do we get them there? Like, even I've heard people even use that text around Noah to work with addicts. And I'm like, did we find the context, or was he just drunk in that moment? Like, you can, like, do y'all want to use it? I ain't gonna lie, this one is funny. I've heard the new wine and the new wine skin used at a recovery joint. And I was like, this is probably not well we need to go working with alcoholics. Like,
Margaret, I do have one other thing that I think is important before we end. As it pertains to boundaries, the other piece that I think that is not taught it would be great to really emphasize is teaching members boundaries around serving. That has been so much condemnation about serving and giving. And so what happens, and my lived experience, because I didn't grow up in the church, when I first was introduced to the church, the serving became an idol. And so for many years, I that's how I got validation from God for serving, because it was poor teaching or even poor con- contextual framework for me, that's how you stay connected with God. I just was released from that bondage. Recently, because it's a draw. I need to serve. I gotta serve. And if I don't, that means that, I am not, um, God doesn't love me. And so
out on today.
when I'm at a church and they talk about it, I'm triggered instantly. So it's still an area of residue. Now I know better now, but it really speaks to a place. So if a pastor is really harping on serving, and you're going to get some codependent members that are going to be frustrated if they're not getting validation after the serving. So I think boundaries need to be taught to members to say, this is unto you and unto God. Search your heart. This is not a requirement for you to serve. It's God wants you to serve, but we don't need you. We don't need you in that way.
Woo! So, can we get 10 more minutes? Can I get 10 more minutes of your
Yeah,
time? Yes,
we
because you brought up something, and we are gonna have to do a part two around ethics, because the people, I'm just honored to know you, Latasha, because that service leads down a rabbit hole of other things when you talk about codependency. There are behaviors that started to happen with that codependency. I can recall being in the church and literally watching. I start to serve you and starting to serve the pastor, starting to serve a ministry. They started to own it. Like, and when I say own it, that's my job to move that chair. And it becomes conflict because there hasn't been any boundary or ethical practice set up around this everybody's chair. Like, this the church's chair. It belongs to the church. Like, you don't, so the service are, I've watched ushers get into it because no, that's my post, and that's what God called me to stand. You serving the house, though. You call the usher. Like, never even thought about that till you said it. I mean, and some other things I'm gonna throw it out because we're gonna do a part two. Sometimes the intimate relationships and service that we do turn into other things too. Why we need ethics and boundaries for our leaders, because it turns into something. Because again, Tosh talked about those wounds that our leadership ain't dealt with. I threw up a book the other day called Attached. Yeah, that when you hadn't dealt with your wounds, anything can happen in a trauma triggered response. So what would you you said it, but even dealing with that, I don't know, because I know you woman of God, like the text. What How have you seen service in the text so that people can even grab that and walk out of here tonight?
I'm trying to, so much in the text. I guess, I mean, obviously we have, Mary and Martha. But I really want to just talk about going back to my Galatians,
Hmm.
just pulling out peace. Like, if I'm at the church 5 days out of the week and I'm not serving at home and I am stressed because of this ministry seat that I'm holding, um, I can't access the promises. I just can't. I don't. I'm not. So I'm resentful because I'm reading this book and I'm praying, and God says I should. I will have these things. It's like He's declaring that because I'm His child, I will have these things, but I don't have them. But I'm serving. I'm at the church.
You said it too, because it almost becomes that position becomes the idol that you are expecting to
It's an
receive the
idol.
promise from. Oh my
It's
God.
an idol.
Ooh wee. My sister that
You
came
know
on.
when
Here
they're
we go.
carrying that ark
Listen,
around.
I know
You know they carry that
she
ark
gonna
around,
start something. Here's another therapist.
rolling that ark around.
Ooh, boy, ring the church. Yes. Oh Lord. I mean, and it does. That's so weighty. And I thank you for those extra minutes,
Yes.
because it's weighty when we watch that, and it does play into how we attach. Like some of us, is being honest, if you watching, you go to that church because your mama, your grandmama, your great grandmama, all of them went there. But it's not feeding your soul. And the reason you serve is because you done inherited a position, and here's that resentment. And God, you're not keeping your word with me because I'm being faithful. But I'm unable to see God's move in my life because I'm holding down a position that's I inherited for some strange reason. And here's this insecurity about my identity. Like, am I myself, or am I my grandmama's granddaughter? Do I have a name? Do you recognize my gift and my talent that's showing up? Or am I just in the backdrop, and here's this pain and this hurt?
Or right, right. Or the flip side, you didn't have a great family relationship. And so your first church experience, everything is enmeshed. So you now are trying to find your family in the church. And it ain't healthy because ain't no boundaries. And so you have adopted that this is what family looks like. And so you carry that mantle to every church because that was your first church experience, and I came from a Baptist church. It was, you stay there, you talk, you go in people's house, you eat, and you talk about people, then you go back to the church, then you get ready to praise dance, but y'all talking a whole bunch of stuff in the back, y'all ain't prayed, and then y'all going before God's people. It's all of that because you're trying to get your family and your validation because you didn't heal from your daddy who abused you. So now you just moved over to the church.
Whew. Okay, we're gonna do a part two. I try my best not to hold people hostage on healthy holy conversations. I promise y'all an hour. Y'all done got extra minutes. Please go back and watch the replay if you came late. Latasha Matthews decided to come and drop, nuggets. And actually, she just came and just dropped bombs on y'all tonight. We ended on a bomb. I don't even know what to do. What is how can the people bless you tonight? Because they need to find the time. So Cash App, Zelle, how do they need to pour into you tonight?
Come back for part 2.
And this what y'all do. So Olivia Tate and her sister came on here and did that too. I was like, y'all, I'm gonna find y'all. But how can they get you out to how can they get you out to them? Because the pastor's leadership watch this, and yeah, to know that you have a woman of God that can come set up your church and be real with you. Y'all know how that don't exist in real life. Like, can I be honest? Latasha probably 1 of 10 people that's actually doing this. Like, I know the word. I know how your relationship with God. I'm gonna be able to identify you, and I'm be able to keep it real though. Like, no, sir, that's still unethical. No, ma'am, you still can't do that. You wanna somebody came up and told you somebody hurt them in the church, you're gonna have to report that. Like, she's still gonna love you through it, and she's still gonna be ethical.
And I remember this, and there are some people who are going to listen to the replay. I remember getting the voice to go talk to a pastor about a deacon who made a pass at me. And they told me they were going to sit the deacon down, and this deacon is praying at the altar, and they did not sit the deacon down. So I had to sit in the church and look at him pray over women. I wasn't the only woman he had done that to. And so it's important to at least have an ethical standard on how you're going to handle these situations that happen, so people don't get turned off by the church. Now, at this point, I was in my counseling program and was doing my own therapy. So I had to pay for therapy for someone at the church who didn't get sit down. It ain't fair.
Yeah, we're doing a part 2, because that I was trying my best to be good tonight. But those are major ethical concerns that we hinted at. I did it on purpose, because that is something that I believe an ethics expert really does need to come to your church pastor, leader. Like, because that is in 2023, that ethical concern, this generation not keeping their mouth shut. And if you get sued, that's it. Like, and the secrets that we had to hold. I know grown women now who that they can't walk back into this house of worship because that person is still sitting there, and that person's old, feeble now. But all I see is what they did. So we're gonna have to come back and talk about that part of the ethical concern, and not to safeguard church. That's what we used to talk about back in the day. 10 years ago, I promise you, I had conversations with people. Well, how can we safeguard our leadership? No, you can't. You cannot safeguard your leadership against bringing harm to your congregation.
One more thing.
Okay.
The other thing, look, I can stay on all night talking about this. The other thing is diversity, equity, and inclusion is just as important as mental health, because now we're talking about even the language that you use. We don't have the proper language. God. When we are addressing issues, whether it's disabilities, whether it's, whatever we have, we don't even know how to talk about it. And so we're offending people by the language we use. And so it's important to even talk about.
You're not lying. I have people in my office, they'll come in because of language. They have not stepped back into a church because of, and it's not foul language, my leaders. It's not foul. You have said something because you have missed out on the diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of people are inclusive of where they are from and how they come. So I know, I watch the little TikToks or whatever and laugh, but the N word, this generation is finding that to be offensive, even though it's in their music. They're like, did you just call me that from the pulpit? let's talk about how that goes against my amendment rights. I'm like, oh wow, like I didn't even.
So I'm even talking about, how you address older individuals, how you address those with, impairments, how
Impair.
you address. I mean, it's proper language, and people
Yes,
are really identifying like, I don't want to be called that. I don't want to be talked to that way, and it's just some education. That's really it.
can you? So let's get this out uh to folks because I think a lot of people too with DEI. I'm gonna put it out here with DEI. I know I've heard a pastor has come in my office and said, "Well, I mean, I ain't got no gay people at my church, so I don't need DEI." I said, "No, no, no." I said, "You have misunderstood DEI." I said, "You have people at your church. You have humans. Yeah, but we all believe in the same God." I said, "That's wonderful." I said, "Do you have anybody between the ages of 18 and 25?" Mm-hmm. Yeah. I said, "You have anybody with a difference?" Which mean different. We all believe the same. I said, "You don't even. That's why you need DEI." I said. He said, "Oh, you talking about people who handicapped?" I said, We don't. No, you.
I mean, have we determined if we have any hearing impaired people? Do we have someone doing sign language? Do we
Woo.
have the closed captions on the bottom of the screen? Do we know that everybody can see? I
Woo.
mean, we're talking about access here. We're talking about access.
Access. Yes. And
Is,
I'm like,
is,
no,
is,
Pastor.
is the height of the toilet good enough for
He
people
gets
who
to
have
that.
impairment? I
He went
mean,
to the Tosh, he was like, I ain't know that was the I said, yeah, that's the he was like, oh, I thought that was I said, yeah, I said, you need to get somebody out. I said, I don't do DEI. I said, but I can tell you some people because I was like, you misunderheard DEI. That's what I said. And he did. He ended up having somebody to come out and talk about that with his leadership because he said, I didn't know we couldn't use it. I mean, he was using some real, I won't use the other words he was using. I said, so we know we haven't said that in 20 years. We don't I don't need you to go and say that out loud. So so this is again, what is your how can they access you? Because people need you to come out.
yes. LatashaMatthews.com. You can find me there. You can request to send me a message. I'll share whatever I can. I definitely think that, pastors have some heavy lifting, and they just need to have some support to come alongside and help with that heavy lifting. Um,
Yeah. They really do. They
You got
really
to hear from God. You got to take all the calls coming in. You got to be the janitor, the caterer. You got to, do the outreach. I mean, this is an area that there are individuals that have a desire and a passion and have the knowledge. Just make us a line item. We want to be a line item on the P&L.
Ooh, make a line item. Y'all don't get nothing else. Please put a line item. For anything, for someone to come
with
out and
with
talk
with money next to the line item. It can't just be a line item.
with
It has
money
to
next
have
to it.
some
Yes.
equal coinage on the line.
And I know we ended, but yeah, this isn't free. Like in the church is still we come. I promise we come back for a part two. I'm gonna get the dates from her tonight so I can put it out there because the other ethical piece is that people are no longer offering businesses free services in church. Church, we a business. This a business. It's a business. It's a money maker. So pay your people to come out to bring quality services to your congregations, to the people you serve. Offer them something more than a plaque and a fried chicken plate. I said it.
We still do that?
We do. And oh yeah, we still. We want to thank you so much. Like we still are. I offer them more, and I know for the ministries I have worked with, I have had the honor of working with fabulous ministries, and I mean they're not mega ministries, but they have given me mega treatment, like down to how I park my Jeep, down to like I'm walking out with a check in my hand, and I'm looking this is horrible. I'm looking at congregation like, now I don't even want to take the check because I mean, I see, but even the pastor's like, no, my people are faithful because they want to be well. You hear that? They want to be well. So they got together and paid for this service. This didn't even come out of our budget. We voted for this. They wanted to be well. And this is our offering to you. So my bigger churches, you don't have no excuse. I mean, I have walked in with churches. I know they had 100 members and the members voted for somebody to come in. And it was not, I have gotten less from 1,000-member church. I'm gonna put it like that. So we'll be back to talk about it. Because people, this is needed. Y'all see her information rolling. Please go bring Latasha to your house. What beauty can you put on the marquee that a Black woman is America's emotional wellness expert? And it's the truth. Y'all go type it in, you're gonna find her. And if you want to, if you want to pay for her program, and I want you to go look at Pessy and see how much tonight really costs, and you're gonna be like, oh, let me find this woman of God. So thank you, Latasha. Thank you all for supporting Healthy Holy Conversations. I appreciate every time y'all come and show up. Please note that the conference is September the 21st through the 24th. I keynote as soon as I got her picture, so I gotta get her permission to make sure we can go ahead and put it out there. We'll be posting that this week, as well as our fireside chats and our pastor aid committee person that will be out. There are 3 phenomenal people, and we got a surprise guest. I'm so excited that he said yes to talk about some of the stuff we talked about tonight. So I put that out this week, but just mark your calendars for September 21st through 24th. And before the 31st, you can get your ticket for $50 because last year you got it for free. But again, ministry cost. So it's $50 so we can pay folks. And we'll be making sure that it's there. Thank you again, Latasha. Is there anything else you want to leave the people with? Because you don't open them up. They at home finding what you just said. They're like, oh no. Anything you want to leave us with?
Come back for part 2.
So love you all, and we will catch y'all next time.